I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons, my Bibliospran, Bibliohowlers, and Bibliomancers. Thank you so much for supporting my hobby and passion even more. It means so much to me. Hi everyone, Petrik here. So today's video will be my November wrap-up, and it is quite likely that this will be the last wrap-up video that you're watching this year, because I plan to release my December wrap-up in the month of January. So yeah, I think it is very likely that this will be the last wrap-up video of the year. So thank you so much to all of you who watch my wrap-up videos, because these are not really easy to do, but I'm always glad to make them because it is an easy way for me to compile all the books that I read within a month and do a short review on every one of them. I want to talk about all the books that I finished in the month of November, and in the month of November I finished 6 novels, and then I also finished plenty of manga volumes. And of course, I will start by talking about the novels that I finished first. And the first novel that I finished in the month of November, it was Dark Theory by Wick Welker. This is the first book in the Dark Law series. I am not sure right now whether this will become a trilogy or not, but suffice to say that I was not prepared for this book. This is an incredibly ambitious first science fantasy novel from the author. Before this one, I think the author has written some books in sci-fi or horror genre, I think. But this book, when I first stumbled upon the beautiful cover art done by Damonza, I was instantly intrigued. And I think the cover artist or cover designer did a great job with the cover art because it captured the bleakness of the book, but also with a spark of hope. I do not think of Dark Theory as a grimdark novel. I mean, it is bleak. It is quite bleak in many sections, but that tiny spark of hope is always persistent in many sections throughout the book. And now that I've read Dark Theory, I think the cover art is even more brilliant now. It really captured the tone of the book. Plus, there are a few beautiful interior artworks I did not expect too. But what surprised me most is how ambitious Dark Theory is. This is a combination of hard sci-fi and also epic fantasy. But the level of imagination, knowledge, and also research put into this book is insanely high. The author combined astronomy, time travel, parallel universe, warping, and many other scientific theories into this high fantasy world, and you know that is not an easy task to do. And I'm not even gonna claim that I understand every single scientific theories put into this book. But you know what? I think Wick Welker successfully combined hard sci-fi and also high fantasy together into this book. It really helps that at the core of the story of Dark Theory, everything is about the characters, because Mire is one of the main characters in this book, and I think many people's investment and also interest in this book will depend a lot on this character, because Mire or Miri is an incredibly unlikable character. Mire reminded me so much of Rin from the Poppy War trilogy, and Rin, as I think many of you know already, is a very love or hate character. And I do not instantly think that every character that is unlikable, I do not think that they are immediately poorly written characters. I do not think that is the case. Even in the case of Rin, I still found her to be incredibly well written, even though she is insanely unlikable. And that is the same kind of situation that is put into this character, Mire. Her constant awful treatments of her peers was really hard to get through, but Welker has prepared the reasoning and also background why Mire acted that way in the second half of Dark Theory, and I think it worked really well in establishing her character even more, and also made me more sympathetic towards her character, even though, yes, she is very unlikable. And the other main character in Dark Theory, Bitro, is another story, because Bitro is an amnesiac robot, and I think Bitro is incredibly likable. I love this character so much, and there are many things about Bitro that I cannot talk about because many of them dive into spoiler territory and I cannot talk about them. But suffice to say that Bitro actually reminded me so much of Qauintrell from a Lycanius trilogy, at least just from this book. My investment in Bitro keep increasing with every page, and I love reading every POV of his chapter. I think Bitro is an awesome character, and his character development and the unlikely friendship that he made along his journey, I found them to be rewarding and also heartwarming at times. But of course, Dark Theory is not only about these two main characters, there is also Ribcage, and I think Ribcage is a super important character in Dark Theory, because even though in a way, Ribcage doesn't develop as much as Mire or Bitro, but Ribcage was there to alleviate the darkness and bleakness of the narrative in Dark Theory, and I think it is super important. Plus, her jumping or warping ability was just so cool to read. And of course, the result of every character's convergence in Dark Theory was incredible. I think if you love high fantasy mixed with hard sci-fi, I think you will have to try Dark Theory. And now that I finished Dark Theory, I know that I will have to read more books by Wick Welker. I think I will start from reading Refraction, his standalone novel, his standalone hard sci-fi novel. So yeah, I think after this one, I will read Refraction next year. But yeah, if you love science fantasy, especially if you love hard sci-fi and also high fantasy, I think you should take a look at Dark Theory. And the second novel that I finished in the month of November, it was The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson. So yeah, this is the fourth and final book in Mistborn Wax and Wayne series, or the second era of Mistborn Saga. And you know what? This was my most anticipated books of 2022, and I had a very high expectations, plenty of high expectations towards The Lost Metal, because it has been a while. It has been a while since we last read a Cosmere novel. I think for me it was Rhythm of War back in 2020, so yeah, 2 years ago. That was the last time I read a new Cosmere book. And after hearing Brandon Sanderson constantly mention that The Lost Metal will have the biggest Cosmere crossovers, I was undoubtedly excited about The Lost Metal. And yeah, I already did a full spoiler-free review of this book on this channel, and I will leave the link to my review of The Lost Metal in the description down below. But well, let's just say that The Lost Metal totally not only met my expectation, but it exceeded my expectation. I think if you love the Mistborn Era 2, if you only enjoyed Mistborn Era 2 just like I did for the Alloy of Law and Shadows of Self, I think this book will have a great chance of impressing you, because I think The Lost Metal is easily the best book of Mistborn Wax and Wayne. But also, this comes with a warning, because yes, this has a huge Cosmere crossovers, and I think if you do not like that, there's a chance that you will not like plenty of sections happening in The Lost Metal. But from my perspective, well, this is what Brandon Sanderson has always aimed to do. He cannot wait anymore. It has been 16 years since Mistborn was first released, and if he wants to start connecting the Cosmere crossovers even more, this is his time to do it. And I love The Lost Metal. I think the character development and everything about it was just on point with the series. Wayne was one of the characters in Mistborn Wax and Wayne that was somehow kinda near the bottom of my list of favorite characters in Mistborn Era 2 before The Lost Metal, but after The Lost Metal, well, I think he and Steris became my favorite characters of Mistborn Era 2. Amazing. And of course, the Cosmere crossovers, if you love that kind of stuff from reading Brandon Sanderson's books, you're gonna love what's going on in The Lost Metal. That's all I can say without going into spoilers here. But yeah, this is easily one of my favorite books of the year, and if you want to know my full thoughts regarding The Lost Metal, please check out my review on this channel. And then I also finished Book 4 and also Book 5 in Legends of the First Empire series, Age of Legend and also Age of Death by Michael J. Sullivan. So yeah, this is the second half of the Legends of the First Empire, and I have mentioned in my Age of War review, which is the third book in the series, I have mentioned in that review that I kinda doubt that Michael J. Sullivan will be able to top Age of War as an installment in this series. And yeah, I do not think that Age of Legend or Age of Death as an installment actually top over Age of War. Age of War is still the best book in the series, but I will be lying if I say that I wasn't engrossed with reading Age of Legend and also Age of Death. These two books are very different from the first half of the Legends of the First Empire, and I can certainly see why plenty of readers, or maybe a few readers, did not click with the second half of the Legends of the First Empire. Like for example, in Age of Legend, Michael J. Sullivan actually used 2 time jumps. So the beginning of Age of Legend take place immediately after what happened in Age of War. But that's the shortest part of the book. And then after a while, it jumped forward in time, a year after what happened in Age of War. And finally, the third and last section of Age of Legends, and also the biggest portion of the novel, takes place 5 years after the second section of Age of Legend. Among many other reasons, I felt that this storytelling structure was done in order to show the deadly stalemate between the war between the human and the Frey, and I think for the majority of the book, it certainly worked for me. But Michael J. Sullivan has mentioned in the beginning of Age of Legend, these 2 books will end in a huge cliffhanger. It's really good that all the books in the series are out now, because these cliffhangers are brutal. I'm not joking, it is brutal. But I love the themes that Michael J. Sullivan implemented into these 2 books. The themes of sacrifice, self-righteousness, justice, revenge, and redemption are some of the key themes of both Age of Legend and also Age of Death. I think this shouldn't come as a surprise. These are the themes embedded into the Rhyria Revelation as well, especially the theme of redemption. Redemption is a very dominant theme in the Rhyria Revelations, and in that series, it was handled extremely well. And although I do think that the portrayal of redemption in the Rhyria books is still better than the one showed in the Legends of the the First Empire, but I think that is mostly because I am just biased about Varia Revelations and also Varia Chronicles, really. But again, seriously, the themes of redemption done in these two books are so good. And also, the themes of sacrifice and the trials and tribulations that the characters have to face are really tested to the limit, even beyond the limit, really. How far will you really go for the people that you love? How far will you sacrifice for the people that you love? And yes, these are the questions asked and answered in these two books. Now, I came into reading Legends of the First Empire because I've read the Varia books, and I wanted to know about the gods and historical figures behind the legends that is told in the Varia books, and I got what I wanted in these two books. I know that it is not mandatory for you to read the Varia books first before actually reading the Legends of the First Empire, but I think, personally speaking, from my experience, I think your experience can only be elevated if you have read the Varia books first, because it is, to me, incredibly intriguing to actually witness the real truth behind the legends, the gods, and also, the world building, really. The world building and lore of the Varia books. We are finally getting some revelations and answers in these two books. There are many sections and scenes in these two books that provided me with big impact, but that only happened because I've read the Varia books. So I'm curious about this. If you have read the Legends of the First Empire without reading the Varia books first, do tell me whether you love this series or not, and whether you love the world building of the series or not. And if you have read the Varia books, please tell me whether your experience of reading the Legends of the First Empire was elevated because of reading the Varia books first or not. Because personally, for me, I have only Age of Empire left, and I am in the middle of reading this book right now, and I'm curious to see whether this will become the best book in this series or not, because going by experience and my history with Michael J. Sullivan's books, he's usually the best when he writes a concluding installment. So yeah, I guess we'll find out really soon, but yeah, I enjoyed these two books. And then I also finished the 7th book in the Echo Saga series by Philip C. Qauintrell, and that is The Knights of Erador. And I have to once again repeat my statement here. And The Knights of Erador is so far the best installment in the series, and I know that I mentioned this in Age of the King as well, in my thoughts on Age of the King, which is the previous book before The Knights of Erador, but I cannot lie, Philip C. Qauintrell keeps getting better with each installment, especially in this second half of the series. The Knights of Erador, the second half of The Knights of Erador was just mind-blowingly good. It was just so good. And I cannot make any promises that my statement on this book being the best book in the series so far will hold true, because I think there is a good chance that Last of the Dragon and also the final book in the series, A Clash of Fates, will be even better than The Knights of Erador. I am proud to call myself a Qauintrellian now. That is, I think, the name that Philip C. Qauintrell named his fans, and I am proud to call myself one now. Remember how in The Fall of Neverdark, the 4th book in the series, which is also the beginning of the 2nd trilogy in the Echo Saga, so The Fall of Neverdark begins 15 years after the end of Relic of the Gods, which is the 3rd book in the Echo Saga series. Now, The Knights of Erador follows the same fashion. So The Knights of Erador begins 15 years after the end of Age of the King, and also this is the beginning of the 3rd and final trilogy in the Echo Saga series. And yes, The Knights of Erador is easily my favorite first book of a trilogy in the Echo Saga series, in the 3 trilogies in the Echo Saga series. It is certainly better than Rise of the Ranger and also The Fall of Neverdark. The first half of The Knights of Erador can be categorized as the calm before the storm moment, and honestly, this calm moment is the only reason why I did not give The Knights of Erador a full 5 out of 5 stars rating. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and then I rounded it up on Goodreads. But The Knights of Erador, the first half, is so much more accessible than Rise of the Ranger. In Rise of the Ranger, it really took me some time to get used to the characters. And also the same thing happened again in The Fall of Neverdark, because Philip C. Qauintrell introduced plenty of new main characters in The Fall of Neverdark as the new main POV characters, and that took me some time again to get used to the new characters after I became invested in the characters of the first trilogy. But thankfully in The Knights of Erador, Philip C. Qauintrell made the decision to not introduce many new characters here. Most of the characters in The Knights of Erador, and I assume the rest of the series, revolves around the characters from the first and second trilogy of the Echo Saga, and I'm really glad for this, because these are characters I've come to love and also invested in. This made the book so much more accessible if you manage to reach this point. And also, you know that feeling when you read a book and you know that something will happen, you are absolutely certain that this event will happen and you cannot wait for it to happen. Well, that is the exact feeling that I got from reading The Knights of Erador. I couldn't wait for a certain event and character to reveal their plot and intention, and when it happened, oh my god, I couldn't stop reading The Knights of Erador. It was insanely good, and I think if you have read the series up to this point, I think you will know who is the main villain of the Echo Saga series, and Philip C. Qauintrell's execution was just so well done. Qauintrell also genuinely amazed me because he constantly mentioned that he is a pantser type of writer, not a planner, but it seems like with every book I read in the Echo Saga, it seems like everything was just planned from Rise of the Ranger. Seriously, it was really good. So yeah, I really love The Knights of Erador, and I cannot wait to read The Last of the Dragon and also the final book, A Clash of Fates, this month. If these two books actually end up being better than The Knights of Erador, I think the Echo Saga will become one of my favorite series, and also Philip C. Qauintrell is guaranteed to become one of my favorite authors. And finally, the last book that I finished in the month of November, it was my last reread of the year, and it is for The Blackest Heart by Brian Lee Durfee. This is the second book in the 5 Warrior Angels trilogy, and once again, I am absolutely stunned by this marvel. I think this is easily one of the finest second book of a trilogy that I've read. It is just so good. The Blackest Heart takes place 2 weeks after what happened at the end of The Forgotten Moon, the first book. The identity of the 5 Warrior Angels have been revealed, or have they? If you think that the prophecies trope will only give away the main story and also revelations in a particular fantasy series, I think you are about to be proven really wrong, especially if you think that prophecies make the story predictable, because predictable is far from what I would call the 5 Warrior Angels. Unpredictability was actually one of the strongest factors of The Blackest Heart, a series that I thought at first was going to be a simple fantasy series turned out to be very complex to insane manipulation and deception in the text of the prophecies and also the character behavior. Upon finishing this book, whether it's the first time or the second time I read through it, I still have no idea which prophecies and which characters to believe in. Brian Lee Durfee definitely implemented how deadly and brutal, complex and dangerous the differences in faith and religion can be, and the result is 960 pages of absolute brilliance. There are so many things to love in The Blackest Heart, one of them being the Company of Nine, which is definitely an ode to the Fellowship of the Ring. The Fellowship in the Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien, for those of you who somehow don't know about it. But what I love about the Company of Nine in The Blackest Heart is that it is still distinct enough for it to become its own thing. It felt like a plotline that deserves to be included in The Blackest Heart and the 5 Warrior Angels. The quest that the Company of Nine embarked upon was just brutally perilous, and the large-scale war that happened at the end of the book was so fitting as a climax sequence to an epic fantasy novel. It is imaginative, breathtaking, and insanely compelling. Reading this entire sequence really made me feel like I was watching a cinematic experience, a cinematic dance of death where there is always a bigger fish around. There is always a bigger fish. And the confrontations at this battle will color the Azure Sea scarlet. And it wasn't only the story, characters, and actions that improve and increase in its scope and quality. The characters, whether in quality and quantity, also increase. And even though most of the characters were morally great characters, Durfee has successfully managed to actually make me care about them. And I think that is super important because not every character has to be good. I mean, if you are reading epic fantasy, you cannot possibly expect that you will love every single character. I mean, you can love every single character in the book, but I don't think you will love some of their actions because, yes, these characters, whether you love them or not, they do some really bad things. As I said, most of the characters in the 5 Warrior Angels are trying to survive as best as they can, and that will always result in them doing things that they will not like. But yeah, the majority of each character's development in The Blackest Heart was unpredictable to me. I mean, just one example here, Lishan. Lishan was a character that I absolutely despised in The Forgotten Moon and also the first half of The Blackest Heart. But somehow, Durfee managed to actually make me kinda care about Lishan in the second half of The Blackest Heart. That is an impressive thing to do. As for my favorite character, well, it will have to be Birma. Come on, Birma is one of the most awesome animal companion to exist in an epic fantasy novel. But really, I have done a full review of The Forgotten Moon and also The Blackest Heart on Goodreads and on my blog. And my experience on doing a second read of The Blackest Heart pretty much is the same as the first time I read through The Blackest Heart. Just amazing, and I'm really glad that I did a reread of The Blackest Heart. Now I can read The Lonesome Crown, the third and final book in the trilogy, and I really cannot wait. Fingers crossed that Brian Lee Durfee will deliver a satisfying and fitting conclusion to the 5 Warrior Angels trilogy. So that's all the novels that I finished in the month of November. As for manga volumes, I finished 9 volumes of Fullmetal Alchemist, specifically volume 19 until volume 27. So yeah, that's it. I finally finished reading Fullmetal Alchemist for the first time. For those of you who haven't watched my previous wrap-up, I have watched Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood so many times now. So many times. It is one of my favorite anime of all time, but I somehow still haven't finished reading Fullmetal Alchemist ever until this month. I finally did it. I finished reading Fullmetal Alchemist, and my overall thoughts, I think it is still an incredible manga series. Whether you decide to pick up the manga or the anime, I think you cannot go wrong. But yes, personally, I will recommend watching the anime because I still think that the anime is better, but I am biased about this. I am certainly biased about this, but I just love the execution, the pacing, the music, the voice acting, everything about the anime. I love them so much. But reading Fullmetal Alchemist reminded me once again why Fullmetal Alchemist remains one of the greatest story in fiction that I've experienced. Other than Fullmetal Alchemist, I also read Spy Family and also Blue Lock up to the latest volumes, and well, I have mentioned so many times now that Spy Family and also Blue Lock are some of my favorite ongoing manga series right now, and just catching up to the newest volumes made me super happy. I love these two manga very much. I think Spy Family is a super wholesome manga series and I highly recommend it to everyone. Even if you're not a reader, I still think that you will enjoy reading or watching Spy Family, and then the same thing can be applied to Blue Lock. But Blue Lock is not wholesome at all. But whether you love sport or not, I think there is a good chance that you will enjoy reading Blue Lock. I am in the middle of watching the anime adaptation too, but I think the manga is still better so far. But the anime is pretty good as well. But again, I highly recommend you to read these two manga series if you haven't read them. But yeah, that's all the novels and manga volumes that I finished in the month of November. As for my favorite book of the month, again, no reread is included here. My favorite book of the month will definitely have to be The Lost Metal by Brandon Sanderson. So yeah, that's my November wrap-up, and it is also, again, my last wrap-up of the year. The next wrap-up for December, I think you will see that video in the month of January. Do tell me how many books you finished in the month of November and which one was your favorite book of the month. My next video will be the top 10 priority series that I want to read in the month of 2023. I hope you will enjoy watching it. As always, thank you so much for watching and thank you for your support. Bye bye. Lastly, I want to say thank you so much once again to all my patrons who keep on supporting me.